will first invite Paula Reeves from the Transportation Commission to give a couple slides, but I just wanted to welcome everyone. My name is John Overman. I'll be doing most of the talking today. On behalf of the Commission, we are the consulting firm that are supporting Paula and her team. And I've got a couple other colleagues on the line to help with the Q&A and the Mentimeter polling that we're going to be doing a lot of today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paula to say a few words, and also just thanks Jeff for helping to organize this today, and we'll give you a chance to provide an update as well.
Yes, I have the honor of introducing the Commission to you if you're not familiar with them. And thanks again to Jeff for promoting this meeting and helping us host it. The Transportation Commission is an independent body of 7 members, 7 citizens, and they're each appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And most have spent their careers in transportation in different areas. And I'm sure you recognize J.C. Baldwin from the Chelan County area. Backgrounds ranging from, career in engineering, career in public transportation, career as an elected official, aviation is represented, technology, just a wide range of skills and backgrounds. That we have 3 commissioners from the east side of the mountains and 4 from the west. And I'll just talk briefly about their role. Next slide, please. So the commission has a broad range of responsibilities. They propose transportation policy and make finance recommendations to the governor and the legislature. And this happens by way of their annual report that they send over to the legislators and meet with them and talk about their priorities. They serve as the state tolling authority, adopting state highway and bridge tolls and setting ferry fares for Washington state ferries. They provide probably, I think, maybe their most important role is providing a public forum for transportation policy development through avenues like this meeting. They hold 11 meetings a year across the state. And in July, we'll be in Chelan. Looking forward to that. They conduct special legislatively directed studies on various topics like the road usage charge and others. And they what the purpose of our meeting today, they're the author of the state's 20-year statewide transportation plan that we call Washington Transportation Plan, or WTP. And so the WTP, we are in that update process, and this plan sets forth the guideposts for transportation decision makers and operating entities at the state, regional, and local levels across all modes. So this is not, a highway plan or a state plan. This is a broad plan that covers all levels of government and all modes of transportation. And, a lot's really changed since the last WTP was updated in 2018. This update will support recent policy changes and new priorities that have been set forth by the state legislature, including the Climate Commitment Act, Healthy Environment for All, or HEAL Act, and the Move Ahead Washington funding package. And the commission recognizes that Washington is facing ongoing funding challenges, growing safety needs that we're hearing more about, and unprecedented growth across the state. And our future relies on a strong and sustained collaboration among all the transportation partners. So with that, I will turn it back to Jonathan for the most important part of the meeting, which is hearing from you all.
Thank you, Paula. So here's an overview of what we're hoping to discuss today. I'm going to give a brief welcome, also invite Jeff to share a few words. I'll also provide a short overview, largely reiterating what Paula's already shared with you about the WTP. And the meat of the conversation today is going to be around the statewide planning priorities and hearing from you all about your local, regional, statewide challenges and opportunities. So we'll use a combination of this Mentimeter polling, which is very easy to use. We'll give you some opportunities to test it out in a minute, as well as group discussion. So I know we have he'll have the opportunity to put things both in the chat, in the tool itself, but then also expand on what you've put in there if you're willing. So I know this was maybe wasn't billed as a workshop, but we'd love to have your participation as much as possible through that that process. Finally, we'll give an opportunity to for you all, any other agencies on the line, to provide some updates, and we'll talk about next steps for the Washington Transportation Plan. So a couple housekeeping items. So as I've mentioned before, this is a Zoom webinar format. So if you're now a panelist, you're able to click on the participant bar and rename yourself, and you can put your agency that you're representing. I should do that myself. You can also raise your hand and mute and unmute. You can use the chat as a panelist. If you're joining us from the public, there's an opportunity to use the Q&A. You can also email transc@wstc.wa.gov if you have any general comments about the commission or the plan itself. So we are going to be using this tool Mentimeter, as I mentioned. Anyone on the line, if you have access to a computer or a smartphone, can go to this site, and this will show up throughout the course of the meeting today. It's the same code, it's the same site. You don't have to refresh. It should stay there. So we're also going to put a direct link to this in the chat. But if you go to menti.com, either on your phone or your browser, type in the code 5505 5523. That should take you to the first poll question. So I'll give you a minute to get there. And we've got a couple pop quiz questions about long range planning and change over time in Washington State. So if you've gone to the site already, this is what you should see. The first question is, in 2023, there were roughly 8 million people living in Washington State. How much did the population increase since 2000, and what is the expected growth by 2050? So you've got multiple choice, either 1 million, 2 million, or 3 million.
Could someone pop the code in the chat again, just to keep that in case people want to? I see the link, but just pop the code in the chat in case people want to join that way.
Yeah, so we've got the code, which is going in the chat, 5505 5523.
And your responses won't be tracked to you, so feel free to speak your mind as we move through the presentation and the discussion. And if you don't join right away, you can join anytime throughout the meeting, and you should only have to join one time.
Okay, so we've got some responses rolling in. I'll give it another 10 seconds here. Okay, so half of you got it right. The growth of 2 million people, the population is expected to be around 10 million by 2050, and it was close to 6 million around the turn of the century. So, pretty significant change over the last 20 years, and additional growth over the next 20 years. The next question is, there are roughly 138,000 light-duty registered electric vehicles registered in the state of Washington. So these are battery electric vehicles. How many were there in the year 2010? So 79, 543, or 1,692. Okay, so the answer is actually 79, and this is a tough question because all these numbers are very low relative to 140,000. But just goes to show how much can change in terms of technology over this is just 13 years. And we'll talk a lot about more about that today. So thank you for taking the pop quiz, for getting used to Menti. Again, we'll be using this same tool, same code all for the rest of the call. So please keep this browser open. If you ever see up in the top screen that it says I think it says something to the effect of the facilitator has moved on from this question, make sure you click that bar so you get on the right question. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff here, Jeff Wilkins, to say a few words of welcome before we get into the overview.
Sure. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Jeff Wilkins.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I muted you when I was trying to mute myself. So
okay, I got it. Okay, I'm Jeff Wilkins. I'm the executive director here at the Chelan Douglas Transportation Council. I think it took us about 30 seconds to realize that this would be a more inclusive way to hold and host this meeting. So I suppose I'm a virtual host, but I'm not sure it means anything at this point. So it does give me a chance, though, to thank the commission and thank the project team for providing all of us in North Central Washington with a dedicated feedback event. And also, we're neighboring counties, but we don't actually connect very often. So I'm particularly looking forward to hearing what's going on in Grant County and Okanagan County, and I'm not sure who else is even here. So anyway, thank you. I think that's all from me. I'm just happy to be here. So let's dive in.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And we'll be back again in July with the commission meeting. I should probably give you those dates. July 25th and 26th, is that right? Let me triple check. July 24th and 25th, we'll be in Chelan meeting. And so there'll be a great opportunity to talk more.
That'll be a good 2 days on the lake.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Okay, so just a real brief overview of the Washington Transportation Plan. So here's a little chart that shows its relationship to other planning efforts throughout the state. So we have the Washington Transportation Plan, which is the 20-year vision, the policy direction for all modes, all jurisdictions, and helps advance the state towards those goals established by the legislature. We've got regional and local plans. We have WashDOT, statewide, modal plans, and multimodal planning. So those are seen under the umbrella, but the umbrella as a tool is not meant to highlight that it's the most important plan. It's really to highlight the coverage of the Washington Transportation Plan, that it's meant to be inclusive of all of these other efforts that are happening throughout the state. So you have your local, regional plans that have specific projects. They have a prioritization process, they have implementation, they have performance monitoring. So all of these really important elements often feed into the local regional plans or the WashDOT statewide plans. And the Washington Transportation Plan aims to kind of bring that together, not to the level of detail that you'll find in some of your local plans. As a project team working with Paula and the commission staff, we're undertaking this effort to update the WTP. We're going to talk a lot about the 6 transportation system goals today, as well as the previous WTP. So the currently adopted Washington Transportation Plan is the 2040 and beyond. If you haven't seen it, you can go to that website there on the link. And really, we're starting from a great place of a lot of good work has gone into previous planning. There's a lot of great work underway throughout the state. But this plan is meant to be updated every 4 years, and because of COVID, it's been a bit delayed. And so there's actually a 6-year gap between 2018 when the previous WTP was adopted, and ultimately, the end of 2025. So it's more than 6 years will have gone by between those updates. So really, this offers us an opportunity to reframe the Washington Transportation Plan with the new current priorities and challenges. And so hopefully developing recommendations that really address those challenges and opportunities. What we're going to be talking about today is the challenges and opportunities. We're here in the first phase of the outreach. This is meeting number 5 of 6 of the regional meetings. So we're really looking forward to hearing from Central, North Central Washington, anyone else on the call about some of where you see the future of transportation going in Washington State. What are your local needs in present day as well as into the future? We're going to be hosting topic focused meetings later this summer, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what those will be about later on in the meeting. Finally, we'll come back a year from now or in early 2025 to talk about those draft strategies to get feedback on the recommendations that are likely to make it into the plan. And then by the end of the year, the plan will go to the commission for approval. So again, just to recap, what we're hoping to do today is to gather feedback from you all to inform our approach in the Washington Transportation Plan, the strategies, actions, policies that make up the meat of the plan. And to do that, we're really trying to understand from you what your regional priorities are, what kind of challenges and opportunities you see in the future. So with that, we'll kind of get into the first section, which is going to be on the statewide planning priorities. So please jump in if you need me to slow down, if you need me to clarify anything, but I'll keep moving forward.
You can also pop questions in the Q&A. Sorry to interrupt there, Jonathan. I just wanted to remind people Q&A and chat are there for your use if you prefer to do it that way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. Okay, so in code, there are these 6 transportation system policy goals. These were enacted in the year 2000, modified in 2015, and they're around six transportation areas that you're probably very familiar with and are probably in most of your planning efforts in some capacity. So you have economic vitality, ensuring that the state transportation system really promotes a prosperous economy. Preservation, maintaining, as well as preservation activities to extend the life of assets. Safety and security of the transportation system and users. Mobility, focusing on both goods and people movement throughout the state. Environment and health, focusing on quality of life, the natural environment, as well as human public health. And finally, stewardship, really how the state is making good use of our resources. So how efficient in a world of finite resources, how efficient are we with our transportation resources? So those are the 6 goals. The legislative priorities have been centered around preservation and safety as perhaps the most important, but that's kind of the backbone of the state policy. And those goals aren't going anywhere. But as I mentioned, and as Paula mentioned, there are new priorities and new policies that have come from the state, that have come from the federal government. And there's an opportunity to realign some of our recommendations in the plan with these new ideas while still holding true to the transportation system goals. So Paula mentioned some of these around funding, the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package. There's also a gap in funding. So looking at road user charge or other ways to increase revenues for transportation. Several initiatives, policies around climate, including the CCA. You have changes to the Growth Management Act that are related to climate and resiliency. You have changes in guidance around vehicle miles travel and multimodal level of service, and also new guidance coming from the federal government around performance-based planning. Paula mentioned the HEAL Act, so equity as a new emphasis area and environmental justice. So these are some of the bubbles. These aren't all the bubbles, but there are all these other policies and priorities that are floating around. And as we're kind of kicking off this process, we've been thinking about ways to reframe, as I mentioned, what the plan might look like in terms of addressing these new policies, as well as the 6 system-wide goals. So there's a concept we've been calling the policy pillars. And in the old plan, you might remember the cross-cutting themes, and these are these are very similar. So these are themes, these are priorities that cut across those goals, but it's a new way to think about how the plan might be organized. So I'll just read these. They're all quite a few words, but I think it's useful. So one policy pillar is around funding. So sustainable funding, long-term funding solutions adequately address current and future transportation maintenance and enhancement needs. Policy pillar on climate and resiliency, a future transportation system that is resilient, redundant, and helps to mitigate and lessen the impacts of climate change. Connecting communities, transportation investments reconnect communities, close gaps in the network, improve access to opportunity, and improve the quality of life. Equity and movement, transportation planning supports historically underrepresented communities in planning processes and outcomes. And transportation technology, the state is prepared to adapt to new transportation technology in ways that further our policy goals, including safety. So absorb that. I'll ask a few questions about this. This first section is really focused on those policy goals, as well as these policy pillars, as well as the transportation system goals. So each time we ask a question, I'll put these back on the screen so you don't have to memorize them. But just a couple examples of how this might carry forward into the WTP update. So here's a simple dot matrix that shows how one of the policy pillars might connect to multiple goals. And this is not exhaustive, because I think sustainable funding is important for each of the goals. And a particular strategy under transportation technology won't necessarily address all of the goals, but there are transportation technology solutions for each of those. So this is not going in the plan. Don't take this as just an example of how some of these ideas are cross-cutting. To put a finer point on that, if we look back at the WTP 2040, here are a couple of specific examples, and we are revisiting those actions and policies. So it's not certain that these particular examples will make it into the update, but if we were to take one of them, such as incentivize the use of clean technology and energy efficiency in the freight sector, that is an action under the environment and health goal in the previous WTP, that could be nested under the transportation technology policy pillar, and it also supports three or more of the transportation system goals. You have another policy: work to ensure that all people have access to their daily needs with dignity and independence, regardless of their ability or income, and without discrimination based on race or other identity. So that is a mobility goal, or it's connected to the mobility goal in the WTP 2040. But we could see that as supporting the equity policy pillar, as well as connecting to several of the transportation system goals. So again, these are just examples of how we could use the policy pillars to reorganize the plan, to refocus it, and still support the transportation system goals. That said, these are brand new. They're in very much in draft format, and we wanted to get your feedback first on these policy pillars. So we have a few questions. One is a simple multiple choice. Do these policy pillars generally capture the top transportation priorities in your region? Yes, no, or partially. And then the follow-up question will be, what would you add or remove if they don't? So just you could think about that in the back of your mind as you're answering this first question. What's missing from this list, or what do you like or dislike about these policy pillars? We'll also have an opportunity in the next section to talk more about your priorities and as well. So with that, you want to launch the next question?
I see some folks have joined since we did the introduction on Menti. Menti is, you can join on your phone, you can join on your computer. You just type in www.menti.com and then enter this code 55055523, and you'll get a bunch of prompts throughout this discussion. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to click on it directly.
Yeah, and if you've joined late and you've been requested to join as a panelist, which most of you should have been, that just means that you'll have access to see the other participants, to use the chat function in the Zoom meeting. We're using the Zoom webinar today because to allow for the general public to listen in, but please accept that panelist the link so that you can have the full access to all the Zoom tools.
Don't be concerned about entering your opinion and your comments. We aren't tracking these back to you or anything, just interested in getting your feedback. So hopefully you'll join Menti and help us answer these questions.
Yes, so far we have 4 responses in that say yes, they generally capture the top transportation priorities in your region. Someone just said partially. So I'll put them back on the screen for a second and give maybe another 10 seconds or so to see if we get any more responses. And if you're having trouble accessing Menti, please put a note in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, so as of right now, we have, generally these transportation policy pillars or the policy pillars generally capture the top priorities in the region. So that's great. But even still, there may be some elements where you want to add something, or maybe they don't capture all of your priorities, even if they capture the top priorities. So, the next question, which we can go to now, is there anything missing from these policy pillars? What would you add or remove? And so please enter some words, some short answers, so we capture your feelings about these policy pillars.
And just a reminder to folks that your comments are not tied to you, so feel free to really share and be vulnerable about your feelings about the WTP. Any idea is welcome.
Hopefully you're all putting in very long responses, but if not, it's great to hear that these generally capture the priorities. So, if they do, and that your top priority is, and you'll get a chance to answer this on the next question. We'll ask you to rank these. But if you do want to just put in the question, what you like in here, that would be great to see as well. Okay, I'll start sharing the responses. I can go back to the policy pillars. Nothing directly missing, but these interpreted as covering all things to all people, as though there are no trade-offs. Hopefully that can be addressed. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think you can find a home for most things under these policy pillars. Safety has come up quite a bit in some of our other conversations. So, preservation and maintenance keeps coming up as well. Is that necessarily tied to a particular policy pillar, or I think safety can belong in different places, but we need to sharpen our pencils a little bit to make sure we have that kind of coverage. But I think this point about trade-offs is really good, and if anyone wants to come online and share some thoughts about that, I'd love to hear more discussion around the trade-offs. Emergency situations, Yep, that's also come up a lot. Could live under climate resiliency as kind of hazard planning and redundancy. That's a great point.
I might add to what you said related to the trade-offs comment. You might think of these as a way of prioritizing or stratifying, the existing policy goals. These policy pillars are kind of all based in state law as well, and maybe help prioritize and strategically apply the now kind of dated policy goals, 6 policy goals. And so with that lens, if there's things missing or other priorities that we aren't capturing in there, be good to hear. See Jeff.
I'm gonna lower my hand. Yeah, I wrote that comment. I think safety and mobility is where you see the real stark trade-off there. And my comment is it's kind of in the priorities the legislature set. I think it should be emphasized because the buy-in to that at the local level is maybe coming along slowly, but I don't think it's necessarily there yet. So even the understanding, making that clear, I think is important.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we can come back to these comments. And again, I think when we talk challenges and opportunities, hopefully we get more ideas about what the main priorities are for the region. But this next question does offer you an opportunity to rank them. And again, we're probably not going to be ranking these policy pillars, right? That's not the purpose of this plan, but just to see the next conversation, if you were to put them in order of first through fifth, or maybe there's another priority that's more important, you should be able to do that using the Menti tool. So if you're on your phone or computer, you can drag them into order of importance, and just as a way to start thinking about our next questions. And again, if you should be staying on the same quiz, and if you've lost it, you can go to menti.com, enter 5505-5523. And if it's telling you to skip ahead, please do so that you can join this question. So keep doing it if you haven't finished this yet. But I'm wondering does anyone want to come online and kind of share what connecting communities means to you? Because I think this has been interesting how different regions have interpreted what that policy pillar means.
This is Sam Castro, Grant County, and if I may, I'd like to share some ideas.
Great.
I've been Grant County Public Works Director for 4 years, and in those 4 years, I've had a lot of discussions with the City of Moses Lake and the Port of Moses Lake, and they're again the pillar of our community. There's a lot of development being sent our way, but the transportation system does not provide the infrastructure necessary for the growth that we're seeing. And so one of the requests, for example, has been, is there a way that we can work with our stakeholders, including DOT, to put in place another bridge crossing across Moses Lake? And this is one of those issues that is really a challenge for us because funding at the city and at the county level is very prohibitive. And so we have been looking at other alternatives, including looking at primitive roads and building those roads out. It doesn't meet the needs of the community, but it is, you know, something that we are overcoming. And so for us, connecting communities is really a core issue for Grant County, not only within Moses Lake, but, you know, some of the other communities that we serve. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any reactions to that or any other thoughts?
Important context to understand, and somewhat similar to what we heard in Vancouver, I would say. And it's interesting that it's the first priority because it was there as well. And I think there's this growing recognition that historically we've been able to do these transportation projects. You know, jurisdictions kind of had resources to individually pursue projects, but more and more with the funding, the way that we're seeing it move, the trend in funding, partnerships are absolutely critical. And you very seldomly now see a project done by a single agency. The MPOs play such a critical role in that. The RTPOs play a vital role in that.
You know, so something else, Paul, if I may add to Grant County, connecting communities. And so, you know, we do have a very large concert venue. It's the Gorge
Yes.
Amphitheater. And,
Who hasn't been there, right?
and, you know, for us, the complaints that we hear are, you know, from the folks that are visiting our county that are coming out from other areas. And, you know, it's the bottleneck, if you will. You know, we have a county road that really was intended to serve our farming community in a very small population. And so it's now competing with concerts that are in excess of 50, 60,000 people on any given venue. And so some of the things that we have done as a county is we have partnered up with the various stakeholders and address all of the concerns, including concerns that were being raised by our sheriff. You know, recently within the last 6-9 months, there was some serious issues, victims in that area, and our emergency responders really had a difficult time coming in and out of that. And so in less than 6 months, we reached out to the Board of County Commissioners. We took a look at alternative funding, again, just enhance that particular area, widen the roadway corridors in that particular area. And so we're still challenged with how do we get our communities that are waterfront to the Columbia in and out of that area when there are large venues. And so our work is not done. We have a little bit more work to do, but finding the revenue within our county has been a challenge, but we have made a huge stride in the last 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, one other thing you said that reminded me of the conversation with the peninsula, which I think maybe owes some credit to Okanagan. So I don't know if Amy from OCOG is this is their idea, but Thera Black who represents Peninsula has mentioned a couple times just the importance of you know, understanding where those primitive roads are. So Sam, you mentioned primitive roads. It could be logging roads in national forest. It could be working with tribal partners. So for the redundancy and for a hazard perspective, just understanding where those alternative routes are. Maybe they're not your primary routes, but to the emergency providers, is there an opportunity to maybe not develop those roads, but to have them mapped and have them be part of the network conversation when we're thinking about resiliency and redundancy?
You know, go ahead, Sam.
I'm sorry, John, you are correct. When we met with our elected officials, we made it very clear that there was potential connectivity from Highway 17 to I-90 around Moses Lake. And so we're in that process of actually taking that primitive road and developing it. And we'll be continuing working with our DOT partners in hopes that we can establish a roundabout where that road is going to intersect with the state highway. For all the reasons that you described. You know, it's a necessity for movement. It's a necessity for emergency responders to get from point A to point B. And then again, limited access to this particular to the north end of Moses Lake has been a challenge because the only thing that we have is Highway 17. Of course, it cuts right through Moses Lake, and so the city officials of Moses Lake has been requesting that the county continue to work with the various stakeholders in finding solutions to the problems. And so, even though we've mitigated some, there's still a few challenges to overcome. Thank you.
Just a quick comment I'd add, if I could. From a regional perspective, when I look at the description you have for connecting communities, I just think it is most closely aligned with the kinds of projects and funding priorities you see at the local city county level in terms of what they're actually trying to go do. Not to say that there isn't compatibility and interest and alignment with the other options, but it just seemed to me to match the priorities you see at the local level the best.
I was just going to mention that the commission hears consistently throughout their travels around the state and the meetings they hold that rural resilience is a big need. And they've advocated for that type of program for the last 2 sessions, as well as suggesting that we begin to prioritize urban and rural projects separately. Just the different needs and the different considerations, they don't compete well. You know, rural projects may not compete well against urban projects in a lot of the programs that we have out there. So that conversation's been going on for a couple legislative sessions at least.
My first thought, by the way, is the way you asked this question in terms of most important. If that was interpreted as our greatest challenge, I think sustainable funding would be the greatest challenge. But in terms of important, in terms of the things that we're trying to accomplish and sort of manage and operate and build on the ground, that was the way I interpreted your question.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think for other in other meetings, often, let me click this to load it up again. Sustainable funding does come up first, and I think that that's probably because they interpreted that way. Like it's essential. It's a challenge, and it's also essential to do all of the work. So I think, yeah, I often just internally, I'm kind of thinking of how does connecting communities compare to climate and resiliency, compare to equity, because those are, like transportation technology being a tool to address some of these other challenges, sustainable funding being a necessary means to address some of these other challenges. So that's a really good point, Jeff. Okay, other thoughts on these policy pillars before we move on?
If I may participate in the comment for connecting communities, my name is Keiko Walsh. Let me do the camera. Hello, I am in Central Washington, Ellensburg, and then I from so Hope Source is the support nonprofit social service organization who also provides transportation and connecting communities in the sense that I was kind of thinking of connecting communities to other communities' resources. Ellensburg is a small town. It's very well connected through highways and freeways. However, that's only if you have cars. And if you don't have cars, and the small town stores has been closing, and then also the medical accessibility is limited in a small town. So you have to go to a neighboring town like Yakima, Wenatchee, and even Seattle. And you have to, if you don't have a car, and you have to find transportation, and then connecting between these counties is one of the things that I see a lot of needs. And people who doesn't have access. Also accessing quality of life and shopping options are very limited. If you have cars, you can drive 30 minutes to Yakima and get all sorts of options. But if you don't have cars, if you're limited in mobility, and then also if you're limited in income and you do not have internet services at your home, and you cannot do online shopping either. So, and they're just limited to what they have access to. So that's kind of how I was kind of thinking of connecting community, is more connecting communities to resources is what I was thinking even other counties. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have, some of those elements are in here, but again, this is sort of improving access to opportunity, improving quality of life can be elements of this, but that's very different than closing a transportation gap, which provides may add a bridge across the lake, or may add a new arterial roadway. If you don't have the opportunity to use that, if you don't have access to a private vehicle, then it doesn't actually increase your access to opportunity. So it's a great point. Okay, so we're going to move on to the the fourth section, which is challenges and opportunities. So get your virtual pencils ready again, to really provide some feedback to us on where you see the greatest challenges for transportation planning in your region, for transportation, the system in the state. Before we get into that, I think we had just wanted to get you thinking about long-range planning again. So here's a kind of a hokey example of how communication has changed over the last 20, 25 years. The cell phone from 2000, the VR headset from today. We're all here virtually, chatting and not in person. So obviously this was sped up by the pandemic, but if you look 20 years before the cell phone, it was all just a landline, which I don't even have a landline in my house. And so things change very quickly. The transportation system is no different. We could have an old sedan in 2000. We could have a semi-autonomous or a vehicle or scooter share, depending on where you are. So there's a lot of technology that have changed transportation as well. And it's really difficult for us sometimes to think about what they're going to look like 20, 25 years from now. So just to get you thinking about that, we have immediate needs in the next 3 to 5 years, but we can also think longer term as well. So here's a quick pulse check. So if you go to the same Menti quiz, Menti poll, and just type in one word or 2 words to describe your feelings about the future of transportation in Washington. I like this. This is an optimistic group. Most groups, we have a healthy balance of concern and optimism, and so we land in the middle, right? Which is, I think, where a lot of people are, cautiously optimistic, hopeful but concerned.
You can add more than one if you have other thoughts. Please continue. Yeah, great.
Yeah, we'll keep this going for a couple minutes before we launch the next poll. Before we get into the heart of the conversation, we want to hear from you. We want to hear about challenges and opportunities, as I've said a few times now. So please, this is your first, not your last chance to provide some input on the direction of this plan. But really want to hear from you. So how we're defining challenges, which will be the first question, are any external forces or barriers that may prevent the state from reaching our transportation goals. So in this case, switching to a zero emission or an electric vehicle will reduce the gas tax revenue. So that could be a challenge for future funding. An opportunity would be an external force that the state could be positioned to act on and benefit upon. So if you employ the right strategies to take advantage of one of these opportunities to address your goal. So artificial intelligence, that could also be a challenge, but it could make it easier to process data and address system deficiencies to address those mobility or safety needs. So we'll talk about the state or Washington somewhat interchangeably, but please represent, put on your constituent hat, and we want to hear from you about where you see challenges in your community. To the extent that they're a statewide issue, we'd love to know that as well, or think about how the state can guide or develop policy to support some of those challenges and opportunities in your region. Before we get into that, I just want to acknowledge that we've talked to Jeff, we've talked to other MPOs and some stakeholders throughout the state already. We don't have all the answers. We don't know about all the issues in North Central Washington. Here are some of the things that we've heard so far. Funding being a big priority. Preservation and maintenance, wildfires and other hazards, roadway safety, a lot of corridor planning efforts underway in different parts of the region, freight travel and freight bypass. So these are some of the issues we've heard about. We've already heard about more today, and we're looking forward to getting some more feedback on some of your priorities. So as I mentioned, the next question is pretty straightforward, but also big. In the next 20 years, what will the state's biggest transportation challenges be? And here again is the code. So please stay on that same Menti quiz, and you can type in your answers there. Okay, a couple comments. Sustainable funding for transportation. So that's definitely heard that loud and clear. It's a huge challenge. Preservation's, I think, directly related to that. Just in terms of, are we able to fix it first? How do we balance preservation with capacity enhancement and other mobility projects?
See the gas tax decline kind of being recognized here. That's interesting. That hasn't come up so much in other areas. That's good.
Yeah, so motor vehicle fuel tax reduction, did I get that right? So being related to sustainable funding, absolutely. So thinking about some of your top priorities around connecting communities, I know funding for those projects was already mentioned, collaboration was already mentioned. Are there other challenges related to some of the policy pillars that we were talking about?
Enter multiple ideas if you like.
So this gets to just the need to fund different transportation priorities with the same funding model, same funding mechanism. So the need to do more with less. What about collaboration? How is that working or not working with, between in the region, kind of down to local communities or up to the state?
I had a gut reaction to that question, John, which is not that many years ago, regional collaboration with the state was primarily through a state agency, the DOT. But, really solidified in the last 10 years, it's not the state agency that really makes many priorities anymore. It's the legislature. And so collaboration is inherently far more political than it used to be, but it just works differently. And I would say it's a little more challenging.
We did hear in several other meetings that, they're looking at new partners that we've never had before in transportation, like utilities, and partnering with school districts and thinking outside the box on these partnerships that, more partnerships with tribal nations are across the board, expanding that. Not just multi-jurisdictional, but a new set, maybe.
Well, if I may, I'd also like to add a few more comments. Sam Castro, Grant County. And so challenges, there are a couple of things that I see being the challenges for all of us that are transportation providers, whether you're city, county, state, and that's finding staff. And so, I'm working with engineers along the I-5 corridor. All of their work is delayed because they're finding challenges hiring people in this particular field. I'm in the county setting trying to recruit for a deputy director, and it's been challenging just to attract and retain. And so I want to identify that as a challenge. The other challenge that I'm seeing is the cost, the increased cost to replace bridges particularly. And with all of the engineering standards and the hundreds of bridges that we have, it's going to be a very difficult challenge to overcome, maintain, owning, and building bridges. Thank you.
I was just going to put your comments in here just so they're preserved, and I spelled cost escalation wrong. So you mentioned increasing cost and workforce. So those are great. So I'll just put them in here just so we have them as part of the tool as well. Other thoughts. Yeah, well, I have a follow-up question for Jeff, but I'll pause and see if there's other reaction to any of these challenges, or anyone else want to jump in.
John, I'll just add, I wrote a note in the chat, but I think Jeff's exactly right. The legislature right now, since 2005, they pick the projects and they help with the funding. So as long as we have, not unlimited resources, there is a sort of political dimension to that and a timeline that goes along with capital projects coming out of the legislature. So it's sort of like a process challenge and a political challenge that I do think is, that's how we do it in this state, and they're pretty committed to it right now.
Yeah, I guess my question, maybe Allegra and Jeff, you could comment on this. Is that model working? Is that model broken? Does this plan? I don't know if we can wade into those waters, Paula, but is there a better?
I don't think so. I mean, legislators don't think so, right? They like the process they have, is what I would share as someone who does a lot of work with the transportation legislators, at least. And again, terms are 2 years, but this has been in place for a while now. And I'd be curious, Jeff, for your perspective.
I'll try to put an optimistic spin on it, which is, I think at least it's helping the legislature better understand the financial limitations.
That's a good point.
What they'll do with that knowledge will be interesting to see.
because they're so engaged in it, they'll see that shortfall. They are seeing that shortfall. They called this session one of the most challenging budgeting discussions that they've ever had. I do know that, WashDOT is updating their project prioritization process. They're often called upon during the session to prioritize projects using a mechanism. And, public engagement is such a critical part of our transportation decision-making process. It's just, I guess the legislative process has its own public engagement.
I do like to speak up on behalf of the regional planning process. And in some ways, the way this works at the legislative level does work well, because it actually provides a channel for good projects that have been through maybe 5 or even 10 years of planning and, are thoroughly vetted at the local and regional level. But they may not ever find a channel to be, on the table for consideration for funding, the way things worked 20 years ago when the state agency sort of decided what was on the menu, so to speak. So there's pros and cons.
All right, well, let's move on to opportunities. And feel free to kind of come back to challenges at any time. So similar question, but just a different flavor. So in the next 20 years, what will the state's biggest transportation opportunities? What will be the state's biggest transportation opportunities? So thinking about those external forces and where we can develop strategies to take advantage of some of those opportunities. And mine says facilitator has changed the slide, skip ahead. So if yours still says that up in the right corner, even if it says the right question, make sure you click skip ahead. Otherwise you'll be typing information into the last question. So if you see a skip ahead up here, click it, even if it says the right question. Okay, just a couple comments in here about collaboration and inclusion. So really seeing the opportunity being working together, and inclusion, I think, is a different flavor to that. So I'm curious to hear, whoever put that in meant by it. Generational change, more acceptance over time for technology-based solutions. So yes, absolutely. There's sort of, it remains to be seen whether the younger generation will continue to, own fewer cars and rely on sharing more, and that as an opportunity to maybe limit some of the single occupant vehicle trips, or whether as people age, we sort of change our travel behavior accordingly. I'm curious if there are challenges in your regions about just aging in general, aging in place. How I know Kiko mentioned sort of access to opportunity as people age and have more limited mobility. If that's maybe that's more on the challenges side, but if there are any thoughts on how those issues are being addressed and what opportunities there may be in supporting those with limited mobility. Keep entering stuff in Menti. If anyone wants to come on and provide any more feedback on some of what they've put in here or what they're seeing, that'd be great.
John, Sam Castro again. I'm the one that added inclusion. And so what I was referencing is, again, with the technology that we have today, we can do surveys, we can get out to to those disadvantaged communities and get their input, their buy-in, their opinions. And so that's what I was referencing by inclusion. We're better positioned, I feel now, and will be in the next 20 years to really broadcast our projects to the various individual stakeholders that are being impacted, and a lot of room for open public meetings and just input in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are certainly challenges with virtual meetings, with making sure that everyone's being reached, but also it does offer an opportunity for people to contribute when they may not have contributed before. I wonder, Sam, if you have any, this is a long range plan, and we've been thinking about how, public engagement for a long range plan. In your experience talking to these communities, how do you talk about projects that are maybe not 3 years away, but maybe 10 to 15 years away? And how do you get interest from community members to participate in the process if it's not something that's going to happen in the short term? And maybe that's not a fair question to you if you're dealing with more short-term projects.
Well, no, I think long-range planning is our responsibility. And so I think Jeff identified earlier how, various counties belong to regional transportation, RTPOs and what have you. And so there's stakeholders throughout the communities that are addressing their challenges and communicating their needs, short-term and long-term. And in some of our areas, and on all areas of the state, really, what we have to keep in mind is just the language barriers, the diversities that we have in our communities, and making certain that our the information that we're sharing is available to all the various folks that we have in our communities. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Other reactions to these? We've got a lot on collaboration and partnership. What are some of the other opportunities? Are you excited about technology apart from the sort of app-based solutions? Are there other potential solutions to address the funding challenges? Are there potential opportunities to address climate and resiliency or connecting communities?
I would also just welcome any comments related to our 20-year planning process. Anything that you want to share or want to make sure we get into this discussion and consider. We asked some pretty targeted questions about opportunities and challenges and these policy pillars, but welcome your thoughts outside of that as well.
Yeah, and as we're kind of wrapping up here, I think absolutely this is an open forum, so please feel free to comment on anything. I think, you know, as Paula mentioned, some of these questions were targeted, but they're also very, very big and open-ended, and these are tough questions. And so I think the next time we talk to you all, we'll have more. Our plan is to come back in the topic focus meetings and really hone in on some of those policy pillars, and some of the recommendations will start to bubble up. So there'll be plenty more opportunities to provide feedback, as well as to help shape some of those recommendations. So raise your hand if you want to comment any more about the priorities in your region, the transportation challenges and opportunities. And if not, we'll move on to the next steps. Okay, so I have one slide on our next steps for the Washington Transportation Plan. We also have some free time to share if there are any project updates. You know, Jeff, you've already shared a little bit, but if you have anything you want to share with the group about projects or planning efforts, anyone else on the call, if you want to use this as an opportunity to update the team, feel free to. We have folks on from the WashDOT Intercity Bus Program team who will provide an update in a minute. But as I mentioned, as we move forward, we have now just one more regional meeting a week from Monday, so a little over about 2 weeks from now. Focus on the South Central and the Tri-Cities area. We're going to be summarizing what we've heard from all of these meetings, really kind of distilling the opportunities and start to develop and refine those strategies. And so at the topic focus meetings, we'll come back with a summary of what we've heard and hopefully start to coalesce around some of the potential recommendations. So look out for more information on those topic focus meetings later this summer. There'll be an opportunity to review the draft strategies next year, and then finally opportunity to comment on the plan when it's in draft format in the fall of 2025. Does anyone, before we turn it over to WashDOT Intercity Bus, does anyone on the line want to share an update from your community? Anything underway that you want to share with the group?
I'll jump in with a quick update from Chelan Douglas. So we're in the middle of, well, we're sort of early in the process of updating our regional transportation plan. Prior plans, we do this every 5 years, were built around this legislative cycle of every 5 to 8 years. There was a major funding opportunity. More recently, we also made some, I think, fairly bold assumptions about the funding available through federal discretionary grants. And that's worked out well for us. But as we go through this next update, we're struggling with this question of whether or not those are reasonable assumptions into the future. And I kind of distill it down to a debate we're having about, sort of, should our plan be based on more, or looking at the infrastructure and services we have and focusing now more on just making it better as opposed to expansion. It's just become, I think long-range planning has become far more challenging to kind of try to predict what any of this looks like, particularly the funding opportunities and funding models 5, 10, 20 years out. So yeah, interesting time to be doing transportation planning.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, anyone else want to share an update? Okay, I'll turn it over to the WashDOT Intercity Bus Plan team for just a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, thanks, John. I think it's just me on from the Intercity Bus team. Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick Lynch. With Transpo Group, we're leading the WashDOT statewide intercity bus plan update. Essentially, this is a plan that focuses on connections between rural communities using public transportation. Primarily public transportation, but it could also include other types of transportation. Really all service providers that are providing and serving those connections. We've just kicked off the project, so it's early days in the project, and we'll be initiating a pretty, what I call like a significant or robust engagement effort starting later this month, kind of and into the summer. We'll be probably going back out to many of the individuals we've been kind of hearing from through this process. We're in the process of developing a website that'll have more information on the project and a survey. And so I would, just keep a lookout for that. Probably still a couple weeks out from having that going live. The schedule has us developing a draft plan by the fall with adoption by the state by the end of the year. So a pretty aggressive timeline for a statewide plan like this. So we have a lot of work to do, but yeah, so just wanted to raise awareness of this effort. Again, we'll be coming back out to different parts of the state, soliciting input into kind of these more kind of rural needs related to public transportation and connecting communities. Again, here's the timeline. And we'll have more information again once the website is live. We were hoping to have it completed by now in time for these workshops here, but it's taken a little longer to get it developed. But we'll probably we'll send it maybe to Paula, and then she can distribute through the email distribution list here for this group. That's all.
Thank you,
All right.
Patrick. Thanks for joining us. It's a really
Yeah,
important, lifeline program.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, and thank you all. We'll let you out a few minutes early today. I really appreciate your time, your feedback. Again, this is not the last time you'll be able to provide feedback on the Washington Transportation Plan. So please be on the lookout for additional meetings as we develop more content, have more to react to. If you have any other questions, comments, you can email us or go to the website and find the contact info on the commission website. So thank you again, Jeff, and the rest of your regional partners.
Thank you all. It was a smaller group, but very thoughtful, and we got a lot of ideas out of this discussion. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jeff. We'll see you
Bye,
soon.
all.
Thank you.